Today we're diving into the truly unbelievable rags to riches story of America's most famous dynasty. When we hear the name Rockefeller today, we instantly picture unimaginable wealth, towering skyscrapers, and high society. But the truth of where this family actually came from, it's completely different. We're going to focus on the gritty, chaotic, and honestly very humble beginnings of the Rockefeller Empire.
Section 1, the peak of power and the 1911 breakup.
To really appreciate their climb, we have to start right at the absolute summit. Picture this, it's 1911, and the US Supreme Court drops a massive ruling on John D. Rockefeller's baby, Standard Oil. Because they built up a virtual monopoly over the petroleum industry, the government ordered the company to be chopped up into 34 different entities. Now, this breakup actually spawned modern giants you definitely know today, like ExxonMobil. And it just goes to show how unfathomably wealthy and powerful John D. Rockefeller had become. I mean, we're talking about maybe the wealthiest person in human history here. But here is the sheer irony of it all. How exactly did a family with such gritty, chaotic, and frankly, scandalous roots pull off the greatest accumulation of wealth in human history? Well, the answer lies far, far away from any corporate boardroom. Section 2. Fleeing to the New World from Rockefeller to Pennsylvania. So to answer that, we've got to pull the rug out from under that 1911 peak. Way before there was oil, way before the billions, there was just a struggling family in Europe looking for a patch of land to call their own. The family actually started out as struggling migrants from this small German village called Rockefeller. Then, in 1723, Johann Peter Rockefeller migrated to North America. And for generations, they lived this unsettled, kind of nomadic life. John D's grandfather, Godfrey, was born in New York before pushing west toward the Great Lakes in the early 1830s. They were really just your ordinary pioneers searching for a better life. And what's fascinating is how these early micro-family movements tied directly into macro-American history. Johann Peter Rockefeller's arrival in 1723, that was actually part of a Quaker-led experiment in religious toleration. Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn as a haven for religious minorities, and that exact environment is what drew the early Rockefellers across the Atlantic in the first place.
Which brings us to Section 3, the snake oil salesman. Let's meet William Rockefeller Sr.
If you thought the Rockefellers were always these refined, high society types, you might want to think again. The father of the monopoly, William Sr., was a hustler and a con man before the term even existed. He actually started out as a lumberjack, but quickly realized he preferred making easier money. So he traveled around selling botanical drinks and supposed medicines. Yeah, a literal snake oil merchant who used those ill-gotten gains to fund a bunch of shady get-rich-quick schemes.
And his deception absolutely did not stop at business. It totally bled into his personal life too. When he first met his devout Baptist wife, Eliza Davidson, legend actually has it that he pretended to be deaf and unable to speak. No, seriously, he communicated with her exclusively on a chalkboard just to win her over. It was an incredibly bizarre and, ethically dubious start to what became a very unstable marriage.
Section 4, a chaotic childhood, growing up Rockefeller.
This brings us directly to the childhood of John D. Rockefeller, who was born in 1839. He certainly did not grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth. In fact, the contrast between father and son here is just incredible. While his father was getting charged with assaulting employees and ultimately completely abandoning the family to live a double life as a bigamist, under the assumed name Dr. William Livingstone, by the way, John went in the exact opposite direction. He grew into this devout, quiet, strict, and just ruthlessly organized young man. He was the absolute antithesis of his father.
It's pretty clear that his intense work ethic was a direct response to that childhood trauma. John chose to push himself to the absolute limit, honestly, almost to the point of cruelty, rather than ever be at the mercy of someone else's whims again. Take a look at this quote, which perfectly captures the psychological armor he built up to survive his chaotic upbringing. He said, "I would rather be my own tyrant than have someone else tyrannize me."
So how exactly did he apply that intense drive? Well, he methodically climbed right out of his father's shadow. He started off with a short bookkeeping course. Then he got a job as a simple office clerk in Cleveland. And by the late 1850s, he had gained enough experience to start negotiating directly for commodities on the Erie Canal, essentially going into business for himself. Moving on to Section 5, the rise of John D. and the petroleum pivot. John's humble trading career hit a massive turning point, right as American industry was experiencing this pivotal macroeconomic shift. By the 1850s, innovators realized they needed a new substance to shine light into homes and power this rapidly industrializing nation. Petroleum, specifically refined into kerosene, was quickly emerging as the fossil fuel of the future.
Now, up until this point, the massive American whaling industry had been supplying whale oil for domestic lighting, but they were hunting whales to near extinction, which obviously made whale oil incredibly scarce and wildly expensive. This dynamic perfectly set the stage for a highly ambitious, organized guy like John to pivot away from general commodities and just go all in on petroleum. And John didn't just participate in this boom, he totally dominated it. He established Standard Oil in 1870. His playbook here was frankly brilliant. He used the newly expanding rail networks to keep his transport prices incredibly low. And crucially, he largely ignored the super risky business of drilling. He just let the prospectors take all the risks of pulling the oil out of the ground, while he focused entirely on refining it.
His desire for control, which, remember, was forged in that chaotic childhood, was absolute. In 1872, he executed what famously became known as the Cleveland Massacre. Over a relentless 4-month period, he bought out nearly every single one of Standard Oil's 24 competitors in Cleveland. It was a ruthless display of how he liked to operate. By cornering the refining process and systematically eliminating his competition, the results were, well, staggering. As you can see, by the 1880s, Standard Oil was refining over 90% of the petroleum delivered into the entire American market. He had effectively captured a complete monopoly, not by drilling, but by completely controlling the choke point of the entire industry. Our final section, the legacy, robber baron or American dream. And that brings us full circle, right back to 1911. It's a journey that took a family from the mud of a German village, through the pockets of a snake oil salesman, all the way to the absolute summit of global wealth and power. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Considering John D. Rockefeller built this empire from absolutely nothing, completely revolutionizing how we lit our homes and replacing expensive whale oil in the process, was the government right to break up Standard Oil? Or did they simply punish a man for winning the American capitalist game just a little too well? Let that sink in and keep exploring.